Hey everybody, this is Michael Atma and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today I wanted to talk to you about self-love. And this is a really important topic because there's so many people walking around at the moment who simply just don't believe in themselves. And self-love is one of those qualities that we can embody that once we have it instilled in every cell of our body, everything changes in our lives internally and externally. So what is it that gets in the way of us having self-love all the time? Well, number one, it's self-judgment. It's the inner critic. It's that little voice inside you. And sometimes it's a really big voice. And sometimes it's a crowd of voices that is constantly putting you down, judging you, telling you you're not good enough, or you're just simply not enough, that you're not worthy, that it'll never work for you, it's never going to happen. All those negative Nancy's, as they're called, that are kind of dragging you down all the time. You know, you go to take one step forward and then there's these voices in the back of your mind going, stop, slow down, what are you doing? Who do you think you are? And those voices live in our subconscious mind. So primarily our lives are run by our subconscious mind. And that is filled with our inner beliefs about who we are, what's possible, whether we're a good or bad person, and a whole bunch of other things that are conditioned into us from birth. And by the way, they're the voices that are pulling us back down because those voices were instilled in us to keep us safe. So it's a survival mechanism from when we're really young and we were told no 50,000 times before we were even 2 years old. And also we were told to don't do this and don't do that and behave yourself. Don't cry. You know, I was told big boys don't cry, and girls are told, you know, behave and be more feminine or be more girly. Don't do this, don't do that. So we have a lot of judgments piled onto us by the time we're 5 years of age. And those voices hang around unless we find a way to break free from them, or at least to quiet them down until our true inner voice gets louder and is the one that kind of guides us through our life. So that's the first thing, is self-judgment gets in the way of self-love. And the other thing that gets in the way of self-love is self-doubt. Now, self-doubt and self-judgment are kind of related, but self-doubt is another whole kettle of fish. It's one of those things that again prevents us from moving forward in our life, and it also prevents us from having self-worth. Self-worth means that we know our true worth. We know what we're worth when it comes to how much money we can make in our lives. We know what we're worth in relationships. We know what we're worth in who we are. And when we truly have self-worth, then it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks or says or does, because we know who we are. And so therefore, whatever we choose to do in our lives is good enough for us. It doesn't matter if the whole world tells us we're wrong, that we shouldn't do this or we shouldn't do that. When we have self-worth, what we think, what we feel, what we want is enough for us, and we don't need the approval of others. So self-worth is a really big component towards having self-love. So the first thing we need to work on to have more self-love in our lives is to stop judging ourselves, and specifically to stop judging our past, which looks like regret, and also to stop worrying about the future, which looks like anxiety. When we start to come back to being more present in our lives and really being grounded in whatever we're thinking or feeling in the moment and just letting it go, and then choosing to focus on those thoughts and those feelings that are going to move us towards what we want to be, do, or have in our lives, then that helps to overcome the inner critic, or that part of us that sits in judgment of every single thing we think about, we want to do, we don't want to do. It just judges everything about us. Then step 2 is to start to amplify our self-worth. Now, step 1 will help with step 2, but we can take that a step further. So to amplify our self-worth, what we can do is start to notice what's right about us. Start to notice what is good about us. Start to acknowledge our greatness in all sorts of things. Start to acknowledge how successful we are, because we already have been a success in our lives. Right now, if you were to think about all the things that you've succeeded at in your life, go back right to when you were a baby and you took that first crawl. You got on your knees and you crawled for the first time. There's a massive success, because before that you were lying down, your arms are like legs are waving in the air, and you had no coordination, you had no strength in your arms or legs to even crawl. Then you start crawling. Then the next step is you take your first step, or even before that, you stand up, you hold on to something, you pull yourself up using that little chair where you stand on wobbly legs for the first time and you fall over. But guess what? You succeeded in standing. And because you're walking today, you succeeded in walking, didn't you? It didn't matter how many times you stood up and fell over. It could be 100 times, it could be 1,000 times before you felt confident and strong in your ability to walk through your life and have more freedom and more choice and have more adventure. You did it. And that's just 2 examples. If you were to really go back and look over your life at the things that you have succeeded in and think about that before you go to sleep each and every night, at least 2 or 3 things that you already have been successful at. Even if it's just getting out of bed in the morning, that's still a success. Guess what? Now you're starting to tell your subconscious mind that I am a success. I am powerful. I do achieve things. I do get what I want. That starts to amplify your self-worth. And when those 2 things are starting to quiet the inner critic and starting to amplify your self-worth, guess what? Now your self-love naturally starts to bubble to the surface. And self-love just simply means that you accept yourself for who you are. Now, if you haven't heard that definition before, I suggest you write it down. Self-love is simply the acceptance of who you are. And that acceptance means you accept your thoughts, be they positive or negative. You accept your emotions, be they positive or negative. And you accept that whatever actions you take, there's a consequence. And if you make a mistake, you accept that you made the mistake, you take ownership, you be responsible for it, and then you let it go. You make a different decision if you need to or can, or you let it go if you can't. That's self-love right there. Now you're telling yourself, you know what? Sure, I'm not perfect. Who is? We're all imperfectly perfect. That's the best definition I've ever heard of perfection. Every single one of us is absolutely perfect as we are in our imperfections. When you do that, when you start to accept yourself in totality, then self-love starts to blossom naturally in every cell of your body. And when you do that, now the message that you're sending yourself all the time is, I love and accept who I am. Then you really are embodying self-love.